Ernie Lanterman clarified that additional nominations could be added. Susie opened the floor for nominations and none were presented. Fred Keenan made a motion to approve the committee members as presented. A vote was taken to approve the current committee members and the motion carried. The following people were elected: Jeremy Estep, Robert Harding, Calvin Holst, and Bob Thompson. With no other business to discuss, the meeting adjourned at 12:19 p.m. Respectfully submitted, Paulette Holst, Secretary.
Thank you, Paulette. So is there a motion to approve the minutes as read? Thank you, Fred. Is there a second? Thank you, Debbie. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as read, raise your hand. All right, thank you. All those opposed? Good job, Paulette. All right, Calvin has a financial report for us.
I'll make this fairly brief, and I'll give you time to ask questions if you have any questions when I get done. I'll talk briefly about our own operating budget here at Lee's Summit, the World Church finances, and also Bridge of Hope. My current projected June balance at the end of June in the operating budget here at Lee's Summit is actually a deficit of $4,632. Still waiting on a little bit of information from the Mission Center, but I think that's I know most of the information, so it's going to be fairly accurate. While that's a deficit, it's actually better than last year by 26%. And as I look back over the last 5 years, other than the two main COVID years of 20 and 21, which strangely had positive balances at the end of June, there were so many unusual things that happened with COVID. But all of the other more normal years over that 5-year, our current projected deficit through the first 6 months is actually better than it has been in any of those other years. So I guess simply to summarize, it's kind of our spending and giving pattern at this time of the year. We generally have a deficit. And this year we're actually better than we have been at this time of year. So yes, we'll see that as good news and hope that all goes well and we continue to support and do positive things with our operating budget. For the World Church, last year's total worldwide mission tithes actually exceeded the budget, the approved budget, by $1.34 million, or 12%. So last year was a positive year for the church. This year, through the month of May, worldwide mission tithes are behind the budget by about $650,000, or 15%. And while I'm not quite as familiar with giving patterns and statistics at the World Church level, I suspect that what we experience here at Lee's Summit is similar to what the World Church experiences. So hopefully the pattern will continue. Last year it was a positive year. We came in over the approved budget, and hopefully that will continue with the World Church. That is information that was just recently released by the presiding bishopric. And then finally, the Bridge of Hope. We've been talking about the World Church Bridge of Hope project for several years now, and an important funding deadline is fast approaching. It's the end of this year. The funding goal is to raise, at a minimum, and while we focus on that number, there's actually more to it than that, but at a minimum, raise $120 million by January 1 of 2024. So, a little less than 6 months away from that now. As of June 13th of this year, the World Church has raised $113.4 million, or 94.5% of that amount. Well, that sounds pretty good. We're quickly running out of time, so we got not a lot of time yet to finish that. But more importantly, that $120 million goal, it's divided into 13 different jurisdictions. And some of those jurisdictions are actually have met their goal and have exceeded that and are moving forward. But some have not. And the Central Mission Center is actually one of those that still hasn't met our goal yet. And so there's still some work to do. There's some expectations for the Lee Summit congregation for raising and making a contribution. We've done some amounts in the past, and there's more to come. And let me just say, I won't belabor the point, but let me just say that I fully expect a really lively conversation in this topic this fall, especially when we're at the budget session and reviewing the budget for next year. So more to come and more that you'll hear about that. I can tell you that I will be working this summer with the pastorate and the leadership team, looking at options and proposals and possibilities, and we'll be making some recommendations and decisions and then forward that on to the congregation. So that's yet to come. Won't belabor the point at this point, but just know that there's still some work to be done, and encourage your attention and participation if you can in that way. So with that, I'll leave that unless you have any questions. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Jim. The mic is coming.
I'm old and slow. There's a congregational retreat coming up in November. I was curious what the budget is for that, or the individual responsibilities of what each cost might be per person.
I'm not aware that we've finalized those numbers. We do actually, the last retreat that we had, we actually collected more money than what we ended up spending. So I did hold on to that in an account. So we're actually going into this retreat with a little bit of money, seed money going into it. But we will be evaluating the costs from Donovan. We've made an initial deposit. And so I've actually seen what their projected totals were. But as far as how that breaks down by family, by individuals, that's, I think, still to be determined. And we'll be looking at not only covering our costs, but trying to help in any way that we can to make it as, hopefully, as fair and equitable, and trying to get as much participation as we can with that. So hopefully that information will be coming out at some point this summer. So I don't know the answer to that yet, but we'll be presenting as soon as we come up with something. Sandy?
I'm interested in your comment about the Bridge of Hope. Is there a possibility that our congregation will be asked to make a contribution to the Bridge of Hope as a congregation? The reason for my question is it's a priority for me to contribute to the Bridge of Hope, but I was wondering if, making an individual contribution, and then the time will come in this year yet when we'll still need to make, when our congregation will need to make a contribution. I'm not making any sense of it out of that. But in terms of, I would like to support what the congregation gives, as opposed to maybe doing it individually. Am I making
Yes,
any
I
sense?
totally understand your question. And let me say that, yes, the congregation has been asked by the Mission Center to make a fairly significant contribution to that. There are, because of the mechanics of the whole funding process, there are some particular steps that we have to go through in order to get recognition not only for Lee Summit, but for the Central Mission. As I said, some jurisdictions have actually exceeded their goal, and that additional money is going into the second part of the Bridge of Hope, which is not just for the retirement promise, but there's some other endowment type funding options, elements to that. So let me say that for those that are interested, we do want to follow some very specific steps in order to get the appropriate recognition. I mean, the ultimate goal is to actually fund the project. But I think there's also some importance to making sure that recognition comes from where it comes from. So if you have questions, individually, you can ask me about that. I can just say that the deadline is the end of this year. We will be, as a congregation, reviewing, discussing, and making a formal determination of our group, the congregational contribution in October at that budget business meeting. So individually, you will have an opportunity to respond after that and before the end of the year. So, any time is fine, but certainly there's a window of time where you can see what the congregation is doing and how you want to react to that. First and foremost, contributions to the project will be the primary thing. I have been working on this for a few years now, anticipating where we're going to be, where we're at, and where I thought we would be at. And so I have some things in mind to propose and looking at. So we're going to try to minimize the pain as much as possible. Fully, I think we do support the project. We just want to make sure that the proper recognition and things happen kind of in the appropriate way. So there is a good window of time after we formally decide at Lee Summit what we're doing and how we do it, that people can individually react and respond to that. And it will influence that number. I mean, we'll recognize that. So there is an opportunity to respond later in the fall if that works. If not, I can talk with you individually and we can figure out other options for that. Yeah, Amy?
I just want to piggyback a little bit off of what Calvin said. Yes, funding the Bridge of Hope is the goal, and any funds you send in will go to Bridge of Hope. But just to piggyback on what he said, if you write a check and send it into World Church, it just goes into the fund. They cannot track that congregation individual. So if you would like to make sure that your individual contribution helps the Lee Summit Bridge of Hope goal, you need to make sure that you send your contribution through Calvin. And then he can make sure that it is a credit to our overall Mission Center goal. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, and as I said, we will have what I believe to be very lively discussions about Bridge of Hope as we enter into the late summer and early fall. So more to come on that, and certainly if you want background information prior to that, feel free to ask me and I'll tell you probably more than you ever wanted to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. As always, we really appreciate your tireless dedication to our congregation. All right, at this time, Amy Estep, acting as a representative from the Mission Center, will take over the meeting for our election of pastors.
Acting is the right word. I have no idea what I'm doing. Just kidding. But we're going to stretch this out as long as possible because I do not want to walk to my car in this thunderstorm. That's right. So as a representative of the Mission Center, welcome, and I bring greetings from the Mission Center president team. As with that hat, and even more so as a member of this congregation, I want to extend my deepest and sincerest thanks to Debbie and Susie and Sarah and Bob for the wonderful job that they have done as pastors and leaders, mentors and guides to this faith community. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. At this time, I know that we have been in a process of filling out surveys, and the pastor selection team has been at work, and I believe that there is a nomination to be made by the head of that team. Joyce?
Can you all hear me? They all said yes in the back row.
I think they need the mic for the recording.
For the Zoom. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The nomination committee composed of myself, Sandra Hunt, and Amy Estep places into nomination the names of Susie Godfrey as pastor of record for the World Church, and Debbie Harding, Bob Thompson, and Sarah Nelson composing the balance of the pastorate.
Thank you, Joyce. Is that a second, Bob? Yes. Perfect. I'm a little rusty. I was like, wait, why is he raising his hand? Are there any, the floor would now be open to any other nominations, and I will say that if you have a name to nominate, you do need to make sure that that person is here and willing to serve in that role. Okay. Hearing no other nominations, it appears that we are ready to take our vote. All those in favor of electing Susie Godfrey, Sarah Nelson, Debbie Harding, and Bob Thompson as your pastor team for the upcoming year, please raise your hand. And all those opposed, the same sign. All right. Congratulations. You get to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. We appreciate you for serving on the Mission Center President team as well. All right, any other new business, including pizza options? Because I don't know how long this rain's supposed to last. Any others? First pitch is still over an hour or so. Okay, Bob's got to get home for the game. Ooh. Ooh, better you than me. All right, I don't see any other new business, so Sarah, would you like to do our benediction for us?
First, I would thank you for believing in your pastorate team. I know that the children had also had their own person that they would like to represent them. Raise your hand, stand up there. Stand up. Come on, Henry. Yes. Yes. So he is kind of the official elected voice of the youth, so we're still trying to figure out the nuances of how that's going to work, but you are heard, young people, so don't worry. Don't worry. Go ahead and bow your heads with me at this time. Dear Lord, thank you for gathering us today to guide the direction of our congregation and discern the leadership and directions that we need to go in this coming year. Allow your Spirit to be with us as we continue to discern, pray, and guide one another, grow with one another. In your Son's most holy name we pray. Amen. I'm gonna break it.
All right, I would just like to end by saying how deeply grateful I am for everyone here and for our whole congregation. I appreciate the time and the love that you pour into this congregation and into this Lee Summit community, and so thank you for being here. Let's adjourn. Good luck getting to your car without getting all wet. Thanks for being here.